What's up, comrades? Nightwolf here, and welcome to another video. Welcome to a fun discussion video that I kind of wanted to talk about for a little bit of time. It was something that's been rattling in my brain, as hollow as it is sometimes. So I thought, you know what? Let's discuss Star Wars Expanded Universe and the reasons why I think, at least in my own personal opinion, it still matters, it's still important, it's still relevant currently, and kind of go against what a lot of there's a lot of fans out there that would love to tell you that the old expanded universe was garbage, there's nothing that really mattered in it, you know, it shit basically, and that considering that George never officially called it canon or whatever the case may be, you know, what Disney's doing is far superior. They're actually making everything canon and yada, 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 yada. That kind of stuff. I'm going to kind of go over that a bit and kind of point out why, in a sense, that they're kind of wrong. Because, okay, let's kind of start off with the phenomenon. I think I just screwed that up. Anyway. Let's kind of talk about the first three original Star Wars films and the pop culture influence that they have. Clearly, they were a very big deal in the mid-70s and then in the 80s. And a lot of people really love those movies. They still do to this day. I have my own collection of the original trilogy as well. Now, Return of the Jedi released in 1983, about a year before I was even born, and it was over. George told his story, everything was hunky-dory, peachy keen in the land of Star Wars. As far as he was concerned, his story was done. He basically was pretty much washing his hands of it at that point. But what George probably didn't realize is how much of a cultural impact Star Wars had, how many fans really loved it, and it was clear that after a few years, people still wanted more Star Wars. So, several authors and other creators came to George Lucas and wanted to expand on the stories that he had already told. And George gave them the clear. He said, go ahead. So, Timothy Zahn, who is one of the most prolific Star Wars novelists that I can think of off the top of my head, created the book. I believe the first one he did was Heir to the Empire. You can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe it was Heir to the Empire. And introduced characters like Thrawn and a whole bunch of other new characters, Mara Jade. The list goes on. Now, basically, the point I'm trying to make, and I may have just went on a whole tangent there, but the point I'm trying to make is that because of the popularity of Star Wars, people came to George Lucas and asked to do things. Novels, comic books, video games. They went to George and asked for his approval. And pretty much everybody used to do that when he was the owner. I believe that there was even like YouTube videos or videos of, you know, I think what was it? It was a Star Wars parody of Cops called Troopers. I don't remember what it was exactly, but initially they did not really have George Lucas's approval, but when they had an opportunity when they had the opportunity to talk to George Lucas, he loved the little videos, and he actually eventually hired them on to work on other projects. That's how a lot of these people got discovered, is because George fostered a good relationship with people who really loved his work and wanted to expand and grow it. And here's the big point that I think I want to make with this video. if it wasn't for the expanded universe, the Star Wars that you know and love would just have been a passing thought in a lot of ways. There's a very strong chance there would never have been any prequels. There would never have been TV shows. There would never have been novels, video games, comic books of any sort if it wasn't for the expanded universe's overall existence, the EU's existence. Without it, we wouldn't have anything. And Disney wouldn't have anything to rip off. To put a finer point on that, anyway. Now, I know that there are going to be some people who are going to point out in some form or another, or at least they might potentially put in my comment section and whatnot, well, George never considered the novels and books as canon. And they're talking about a quote from an interview that George did many, many moons ago. And you know what? Maybe it has some weight, but George, let's be clear here. George is not always the most mentally sound individual. He kind of goes all over the place. All you have to do is look at the prequels and you can kind of tell he can be a little bit out of it. And, maybe he said it in passing, and maybe at first he didn't care. Maybe eventually he did care. We don't know. But the big important thing to go over here is that that's only one comment. And if he didn't care about the expanded universe stuff, if he never really thought of it as canon or anything, then there's a few things that some people might like to know. One of the things that they might like to know is that George did pay attention to that expanded universe stuff. And, well, the one thing is that before Disney buying Lucasfilms and all that, there were people in charge of an archive that kept track of all the expanded universe books, comics, video games, and all that stuff. They kept it in a nice database for reference for future films and projects. So, with that said, why would George dedicate an entire group of people or even a person to keep tabs on everything and have it be like a very important thing for the franchise at that point in time, to kind of keep track of everything and keep everything cohesive, keep it moving forward? I'll reference it when necessary. It's kind of an interesting thought to point out. Also, George actually took a lot of the ideas and inspirations from a lot of the novels and stories and whatnot from the expanded universe. Let's look at the Phantom Menace real quick. I know a lot of people don't like the prequels, but bear with me. Let's discuss the Phantom Menace a bit. Because there's a few things that, and in the prequels that George took. There's that one Jedi Knight, the Twi'lek Jedi Knight known as Aayla Secura, I think. He took inspiration from novels and added her into the films. The twin-bladed lightsaber was actually not something George came up with on his own. They were in novels and books prior to the release of Phantom Menace, so that epic-looking blade that Darth Maul carries is actually not one of George's original ideas. It was something that came from the expanded universe, and clearly he liked it enough to include it into the films. Also, the word Sith for the villains of the franchise. You know how everybody now calls Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine and all these other dark, evil Force users as Sith. They started including that into films like the Phantom Menace and the prequels. Before this, if you go back and watch the original trilogy, Sith is never used. Once. In the original cut. They're just known as the dark side of the Force. They don't have a title, so to speak, or a faction to call themselves under. So, with that thought, where did George get the idea to call them Siths? He got those ideas from the Expanded Universe books and whatnot. They started calling them Siths. In the novels and in comics and whatnot, they started using that terminology, especially in all of the old, like, Tales of the Jedi related canon. So, George clearly liked the word, he liked the idea, or he greenlit the word, and eventually put them in the prequels. But the more important thing that I would like to cover in this video in general is the importance that the Expanded Universe has had profoundly on the fan base, on myself, and all of that stuff. Or, well, no, actually first I want to cover one thing that some fans have been trying to say, or that they have been saying, the fans of the new canon. They have said quite a few times that the old Expanded Universe was disjointed, convoluted, it had a lot of really crappy stories and whatnot, and that the new canon is far better. It's superior in every considerable way. While I will agree that in the Expanded Universe there is some shit, it was bound to happen. Yes, it could end up being convoluted. Yes, it can end up being a mess. And I agree with that. However, what I would also like to say is that Disney is on the fast track to doing the same thing with the current Expanded Universe. Not to mention, with the current release of Star Wars The Last Jedi, it's clear that no one's even reading or paying attention to the current canon anyway. So, F the rules, I guess, and just kind of throw it out the window. Who cares? We can make up shit as we go. That seems to be the mandate from Disney. We can do whatever the hell we want. But the more important thing to keep in mind is that there's a lot of really good stories that came out of the Expanded Universe. And like I said earlier, the Expanded Universe kept the franchise alive for several decades. Because if it wasn't for the Expanded Universe, we probably would never have gotten the prequels. We probably never would have gotten the new films that we've gotten, or the video games that we've been enjoying over several years. I know for myself, I got the novel Heir to the Empire. I read several Dark Horse comic books at the time that were part of the Expanded Universe or were retellings of old novels, and some that weren't. I enjoyed thoroughly playing through video games of the Star Wars universe like Dark Forces, Rogue Squadron, Star Wars Battlefronts, the originals, KOTOR 1 and 2, and there's a lot of other Star Wars related properties and games that were a lot of fun and that really helped keep the minds of young kids and adults going and enjoying Star Wars for many more years to come. In more recent times, I've started to, due to my disappointment in Disney, I started to reconnect with some of those old stories and whatnot for Star Wars, and I'm holding one of the bound graphic novels for one of those books, Dark Force Rising. I have yet to read it, but I bought it quite a while ago, and I'm just happy to have it back in the collection. I have a couple of the Knights of the Old Republic comics all over the place. I've got some Mandalorian related books, like one of the Jango Fett mini series that Dark Horse did many years ago. I think that the Expanded Universe that we had was very important in keeping a lot of Star Wars fans engaged and happy It was basically, I think what I'm trying to get at is that it expanded on the mythology that George already built. It helped grow it and make it new, or tell new stories, or make things more expansive and larger than probably what George even originally intended. The expanded universe is something that I feel like has been given the shaft in recent years by the community and the fan base, because now that Disney owns it, their canon is the only one that matters. And me personally, I don't agree with that. You can put the Legends banner on the Star Wars the old Star Wars expanded universe stuff as much as you want. As far as I'm concerned, that stuff is far more canon than what we've been getting currently from Disney. And, well, quite honestly, I just want to enjoy Star Wars the way that I enjoy Star Wars. I want to read the stories that I'm interested in. I want to have fun. If that means that I can't have fun with the current canon and continuity, then that means I'll just re-explore the old canon stuff or expanded universe stuff that people have shunned. I'll go out and buy the books, the comics, the novels. I ain't afraid to do that. I'll go play the old video games because I'm a Star Wars fan and I love this stuff. I wish that it could have continued, because there were a lot of fans that were left out in the lurch. There were stories that were incompleted, or video games that weren't finished. I've talked about some of them before, like Star Wars 1313 or Star Wars Battlefront 3. Another KOTOR game could have been in the works at one point. I don't know if that will ever return. But unfortunately, we probably won't get any of that thanks to Disney, but I can still enjoy what we had. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You can tell me what you think of the expanded universe in the comment section below. Leave me a comment down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. I can't speak for some reason tonight. Leave a like on the video also if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new here. I'd greatly appreciate the support by hitting notifications as well, so you can keep up to date with me. And as always, do not forget to raise your nerd flags high, and I will see you next time. Nightwolf is out.